The title is Angels Help in Adversity. Today, we start with a quiz on the story in Exodus. Don't be nervous because you don't necessarily have to get a scholarship or get an A grade. But this means that you should reflect on God's Word once again. Let's look at examples of angelic help in succession. Let's take a quiz. 1. When Moses and the Israelites crossed the Red Sea in 1500 BC, was the Red Sea split by Moses under God's instruction? Or was an angel here? 1. The Red Sea was divided by Moses under God's instructions. 2. An angel came nearby. Exodus. The Lord said unto Moses, Lift thou up thy rod, and stretch out thine hand over the sea, and divide it. And the children of Israel shall go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. The angel of God, which went before the camp of Israel, removed and went behind them. And the pillar of the cloud went from before their face and stood behind them. Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. Answers 1 and 2 are both correct. Rather than thinking that we got to this point in our life because we did well or happened by chance, we would like to think that God or an angel of God intervened in our lives. During the time of the prophet Elisha in 2 Kings, the seas had to open like Gehazi to see everything. 2 Kings. When the servant of the man of God was risen early and gone forth, behold, an host compassed the city both with horses and chariots. His servant said unto him, Alas, my master, how shall we do? And he answered, Fear not, for they that be with us are more than they that be with them. Elisha prayed and said, Lord, I pray thee, open his eyes, that he may see. The Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and the chariots of fire round about Elisha. I would like to talk about the extensions of one above. 2. I had once heard of testimony from A. Sometime in the early 1980s, while going to church during the week, he got off the subway at the wrong place, and while going back to where he was supposed to get off, several station employees were holding a person A and arguing with him. Suddenly, a young man B got involved in the argument that had nothing to do with him and intervened by defending A. Immediately, the dispute was resolved and A went to church without any problems. B was not very tall and had an average physique. He was a being from heaven who momentarily helped A and then disappeared. 3. During the Antarctic expedition in 1914 to 1916, 3 people, including Shackleton, left behind the shipwrecked sailors and searched for their way in Antarctica to rescue the crew after their ship was shipwrecked. Shackleton testified that there was one other person on the frozen journey in Antarctica to Stromness whaling station. Was the other a messenger sent from heaven to help them? After passing South Georgia Island, Shackleton calmly summarized the events so far and recorded. Looking back on this time, I am convinced that God was always with us and guided us through the stormy seas and ice floes between Elephant Island and Georgia Island. Even as we marched for 36 hours across unknown mountains and glaciers in the interior of South Georgia Island, It always seemed like there were four of us, not three. I didn't say that to the crew at the time, but Weasley later told me this. Captain, when I was crossing the mountain, I had a strange feeling that someone else was next to me. Crane also confessed that he had the same thought. When they returned to the human world, it felt like the being who had led them all along had disappeared. If there were even one dead member on Elephant Island, all the hard work so far would have been in vain. 4. During the Korean War, British Major David Wilson and his unit had to retreat due to a sudden attack by the Chinese army in November 1950. During the retreat, it was unknown where the surprise attack would come from, and there were no vehicles or information. Their retreat was successful, but 2 days later, the U.S. Army 2nd Division was annihilated by the Chinese Army, who helped Major Wilson and his group. The ghosts of comrades, were they angels that felt like that? North Korea, evening 28 November 1950. China had struck. The UN command was smashed. A terrible retreat had begun. For the Anglo-Austrian 27th Brigade north of Kunuri Pass, there was neither transport nor intelligence of Chinese forces. Somewhere to the south, a machine gun stuttered. In tactical information, the Argyll and the Sutherland Highlanders set off on foot, leading the brigade into the valley. At the head of the column, the mournful notes of the bagpipers echoed from the dark cracks. The Scottish soldiers struggled south. High above the black sky was a storm of stars. Among their chill glitter, Major David Wilson sensed an otherworldly presence. If the profession of soldiering has a spiritual side, one vehicle to that state is the night march. This is when exhausted troops are rolled by the trance-like rhythm of the column, switch over to autopilot, and half asleep, half awake, leave behind their bodily aches and retreat deep into their thoughts and dreams. So it was for the major that night. The hills were infested with enemies, though nobody yet knew it. This is where the U.S. 2nd Infantry Division would be massacred 2 days hence, but Wilson sensed the spectral lights, ranks of Argyls long dead, gazing down upon their descendants in their hour of need, guiding them out of peril. After 18 miles, the Argyls were through, picked up by U.S. trucks. They were conveyed to the next position. Years later, the Scottish officer found lines in a poem that captured his thoughts of that night. Those soldier stars that paced the beach of heaven. Next, let's look at Bible scenes. 5. There is a scene in the Bible where Peter is imprisoned and is rescued by an angel. Acts. Peter therefore was kept in prison. The same night Peter was sleeping between two soldiers bound with two chains. And the keepers before the door kept the prison. Behold, an angel of the Lord came upon him, and he smote Peter on the side, and raised him up. His chains fell off from his hands. The angel said unto him, Go thyself, and bind on thy sandals, and follow me. And he went out and followed him. When he were past the first and the second word, they came unto the iron gate that leadeth unto the city, which opened to them of their own accord. And they went out, and the angel departed from him. 6. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who did not serve the idols of King Nebuchadnezzar, were thrown into the fiery furnace, but they did not die. And there was a fourth person in the fiery furnace. Who is he? Daniel, he will not serve thy God nor worship. Then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury. He spake and commanded that they should heat the furnace 17 times more than it was wont to be heated. He commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace, and the furnace exceeding hot. The flames of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Then Nebuchadnezzar, the king, was astonished, said, Lord, I see four men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the first is like the Son of God. Finally, our Bible verses again. Exodus 14:19 and 21. The angel of God, which went before the camp of Israel, removed and went behind them, and the pillar of the cloud went from before their face and stood behind them. Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all the night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. In Japanese. In Chinese. Thank you.